The roar is relentless, so loud it steals your breath as a steel blade 9 foot tall blurs at 200 revolutions per minute, shaking the mill floor under your boots. The scent of burning pine hangs thick in the air, mixing with the bitter tang of sweat and fear. One slip of a laborer's hand, and the cost isn't just pain, it's a limb or a life. Men once prayed to see the end of a shift beside this monster, because in these sawmills, the value of a single blade could outweigh a man's yearly wage. What forces turned ordinary workers into sacrifices for profit, and how did a machine become the heart and the terror of an industry? To answer that, we have to face the machine head on. Steel dominates the mill, not just in the blade itself, but in every part that keeps it spinning. At the heart of the machine stands the drive wheel, a solid disc of cast iron or steel, 9 feet across, weighing more than a draft horse. Its rim, polished by years of friction, blurs as it turns, barely visible behind clouds of sawdust. Every revolution sends a shudder through the timber frame, shaking loose nails and rattling the lungs of anyone nearby. The drive wheel is paired with a tension lever, a device no bigger than a man's forearm, yet responsible for holding thousands of pounds of force in check. Operators adjust this lever by feel, sometimes no more than a 15% twist between perfect tension and catastrophic failure. Too loose, and the blade whips off the wheel. Too tight, and the steel begins to whine, straining toward a snap that comes without warning. Behind it all, the steam engine crouches like a beast. 200 horsepower, fed by a constant diet of coal and water, forces the saw into motion. Pistons pound, belts slap, and the line shaft groans as it transmits raw power to the blade. In early morning, when the boilers are stoked and the whistle blows, the entire building trembles. The saw's teeth bite into the first log, and the air fills with the scent of burning resin and scorched metal. Every component is oversized, overbuilt, and overstrained. The steel frame, bolted deep into stone foundations, must absorb the shock of each log forced through its speed. Adjustable dogs, iron clamps, hold timber in place, but even these can slip, sending logs spinning or jamming the blade. The pressure builds with every shift, as foremen demand more speed, more output, more risk. Failure is never far away. The journals of the period speak of 4 common disasters. A blade snaps, flinging shards like shrapnel. A drive belt slips, whipping across the floor. A bearing seizes, freezing the saw in an instant. Or a misaligned clamp jams a log, sending a surge of force back through the machine. Each failure can maim or kill without warning. The machine's size and power are not just impressive, they are unforgiving. A single error in tension, a moment's distraction, or a tired hand on the lever, and the line between control and chaos vanishes. Here, steel does not forgive. It only waits. If you want more stories about the machines that built and broke America, subscribe for our next deep dive. Stay with us as we uncover the hidden costs of progress. And don't forget to subscribe to honor the men who risked everything beside these monsters. A single blade, forged from premium steel, cost a sawmill $4 in 1905. That number, stamped in black ink on a price flyer, carried weight far beyond its modest face value. In the ledger books of the William Cameron Company, each fresh blade was logged as an asset, no different from a new mule or a barrel of oil. But in the life of a laborer, $4 was nearly half a week's pay. The Bureau of Labor Statistics set the average wage for a mill hand in 1915 at $9.58, with no guarantee of steady work. For the man feeding logs into the saw, the steel edge spinning inches from his chest represented not just danger, but a daily reminder of where he stood in the mill's hierarchy. Below the blade, below the ledger, always replaceable. Mill owners understood the arithmetic. A blade could be stretched across weeks of hard use, its life measured in board feet, not in hours. The ledgers reveal a strict cap, no more than 4 blades per quarter, regardless of output, regardless of fatigue. When a blade snapped early, the loss was not just metal, but profit. Owners calculated that every extra dollar spent on steel was a dollar lost from the bottom line. To recover, foremen drove their men harder, rationed oil, skipped inspections, and pushed tension past the safe limit. The risk shifted quietly onto the backs of those closest to the teeth. For a laborer, the numbers were unyielding. If a man lost a hand or worse, the mill might pay out a few weeks' wages, never enough to cover a lifetime of work cut short. The blade, meanwhile, would be replaced and returned to the ledger, its cost amortized over the next run of timber. The machine's value was tracked down to the cent. A man's value was written in pencil, easily erased. This was the hidden ledger of the American sawmill: steel above flesh, profit above safety. The logic was simple, and it was brutal. If you want to hear the stories that the ledgers tried to hide, the accidents, the cover-ups, the men who paid the real price, subscribe now. Stay with us as we pull back the curtain on the cost of progress. And if you believe these stories matter, hit subscribe to make sure they're not forgotten. Jacob L. Hansen's name appears in the Minneapolis Tribune on June 13, 1893, not as a craftsman or foreman, but as the man who lost his right hand to the Prescott bandsaw. The paper's headline reads, "Foreman Maimed by the Humming Band." Hansen's diary, recovered decades later, holds the line, "Never look at the blade while it's humming." In the mill, that phrase became a whisper passed from man to man, a rule born of terror. On that day, the saw was running at 1,000 surface feet per minute, faster than any man could hope to react. The official inquest, filed in Hennepin County, records that the blade had been pushed past its safe limits the evening before. A crack, visible at the 2,800-foot mark, was ignored. Production targets demanded the blade stay in use. When Hansen reached to adjust the tension lever, the steel sang and snapped. The teeth caught his hand, and the machine did not slow. The Tribune described the aftermath. The hand was severed clean, blood on the floor, men silent, the saw still turning. No payout came from the mill, only a note in the ledger and a replacement hired before the week was out. Hansen's warning, "Never look at the blade," became a mantra, but the saw kept spinning and the men kept working. 9 years later, in Portland, Oregon, the Oregonian ran a front-page story on October 5, 1902, 8 dead in mill catastrophe. A circular saw, running at 250 revolutions per minute, 30% above the maker's limit, jammed on a misaligned quarter-log dog. Under the strain, the blade let go. Steel shards tore through the crowd of workers gathered for the shift change. The coroner's report listed the cause: overtension. Repeated speed-up orders. Foreman's directive: keep the line moving. 3 similar jams had been logged in the company books that month, each dismissed as operator error until the day the blade came apart. Samuel R. McCarty, the foreman, testified in court. The chief aim was to keep the line moving at the highest speed possible, even if the blade showed signs of fatigue. His words echoed through the union hall, fueling a strike demand for regulated blade changes. But the mill reopened within days, and another crew took the floor. 8 men dead, 1 blade replaced. The Oregonian's final line: "The machine is repaired. The men are not." If you want to hear the stories that the ledgers tried to hide, the accidents, the cover-ups, the men who paid the real price, subscribe now. Stay with us as we pull back the curtain on the cost of progress. And if you believe these stories matter, hit subscribe to make sure they're not forgotten. In January 1910, the Spokane Chronicle ran a headline that echoed across the timber camps of the Pacific Northwest: 3 men lose hands in mill surge. The previous summer, wildfire had swept through the Spokane Valley, stripping hillsides bare and setting off a desperate race to salvage what timber remained. For the West Lumber Company, the disaster was a windfall and a curse. Orders doubled overnight. Foreman, under pressure to meet quotas, ordered the Prescott bandsaw up to 1,300 surface feet per minute, nearly 2/3 faster than the manufacturer's limit. The ledger books showed daily runs swelling to 90,000 board feet, a figure that strained every bolt and bearing in the mill. Inside the sawhouse, the air was thick with resin and panic. The bandsaw's edge blurred to invisibility, screaming through log after log. Tension levers were wrenched tight, far past safe tolerance. Men worked 12-hour shifts, hands slick with sweat and sawdust, eyes fixed on the trembling steel. Each log forced through at that speed sent a shudder through the frame, a warning that went unheeded. On January 11th, the blade gave out. Metal fatigue, stoked by weeks of overtension, split the steel in a single explosive moment. The snap was louder than the steam whistle, sharp enough to silence the entire floor. 3 men, all stationed within arm's reach of the blade, lost their hands before the machine could be stopped. The Spokane Chronicle described the scene in a single line. No time to pull away, the saw took what it wanted. Labor hearing records from the following year capture the calculus behind the disaster. Mill owner Charles R. Davis testified, "The pursuit of profit after the fire left us little choice but to run the machines faster, even though we knew the risks." The court transcript notes that the cost of a new blade was weighed against the value of lost timber, not the value of lost limbs. For every day the saw ran hot, the company reclaimed a piece of the burned forest and gambled with the bodies of its workers. The Spokane incident was not an outlier. It was the natural result of a system that put market demand above human life. 3 amputations, 1 blade replaced. The Chronicle's final word: the saw is mended, the men are not. These stories are not relics, they are warnings. Subscribe now to hear the voices the ledgers tried to erase. If you believe these histories matter, subscribe to keep them alive. And for more stories of the machines that shaped and shattered America, subscribe and join us as we continue this journey. 70% of a mill worker's wages never left the mill. Paychecks arrived as scrip, good only at the company store, and most men owed more than they earned. The ledgers from the William Cameron Company in 1907 list a typical hand as $5 in debt by spring, his pay docked for boots, lamp oil, and the endless grind of store-bought bread. In the bunkhouse, men whispered about the mill's arithmetic. The blade always got paid first. Lisa Kelly, whose grandfather worked the saws in Camas, Washington, described the ritual her family called the morning promise. Before dawn, while the steam was building and the floor still cold, her grandfather would murmur a prayer. "God keep my hands from the teeth of the great band, for they hunger daily." That line appears in a letter he sent home in 1904, now brittle with age. The ink faded, but the fear unsoftened by time. Oral histories from the Upper Peninsula echo the same words, sometimes to the saw spirit, sometimes to saints, always to something beyond the mill's reach. Superstition was not a joke here. Men carried iron nails or bits of horseshoe in their pockets, hung tiny charms from the tension lever, or tied red string around their wrists. The no-look rule, never stare directly at the moving blade, was passed down from Jacob Hansen's diary, repeated in Union pamphlets, and recited like a catechism before every shift. The Union Minutes from Minnesota in 1905 record it as Rule 1, eyes on the log, never on the band. Mill hands spoke of Friday as a cursed day. Blade changes were delayed if the calendar showed the 13th. Some men refused to cut the first log of a new run, believing the saw remembered who fed it last. These were not just stories. They were survival codes, born from the knowledge that the machine did not care who prayed, who paid, or who bled. Debt bound the men to the mill, but it was fear that shaped their days. The prayers, the talismans, the whispered rules, each was a shield against a reality everyone understood. The blade would take what it wanted, and no promise could keep it satisfied for long. If these stories matter to you, subscribe now to help keep them alive. For more voices from the mill floor, subscribe so they're not forgotten. And if you want to honor the men who prayed to make it home, subscribe to join us for the next chapter. Orders came down from the office with the weight of law. In 1903, the West Lumber Company's daily production target was set at 75,000 board feet, a figure that pushed every limit of the saw, the men, and the mill itself. The directive was simple: speed up the line, keep the blade moving, and don't stop for anything short of catastrophe. Output records from that year show a relentless climb, each day's tally scrawled in ink beside the previous, like a scoreboard where the only prize was survival. The blade's life was measured not in hours, but in board feet. Manufacturer guidelines called for a fresh blade every 6,000 feet, but by 1907, ledgers reveal blades routinely forced to 10,000, sometimes more. Oil was rationed, inspections skipped, and tension levers wrenched tight past the point of safety. In the 1906 audit, nearly 3/4 of inspection reports were signed off without the blade ever being checked. The numbers were doctored, the risks ignored. A dull blade could cost $4 to replace, but a single hour of downtime means hundreds lost in timber. The arithmetic was cold and clear. Better to gamble with men's bodies than the mill's bottom line. John H. Kincaid's name appears in the 1911 purchase order for a new bandsaw from W.M. Crandall Company, the largest single investment in the mill that year. Kincaid was no stranger to the economics of speed. His own directive, preserved in a surviving memo, reads, "No blade change before 10,000 feet. Output is king." Under his watch, the saw ran hot, the men ran harder, and the margin for error vanished. Kincaid's policies became the model for mills across the Midwest, a template for profit that left safety as an afterthought. The consequences were predictable. Accident rates surged. Coroner's notes from the period list blade fatigue, overtension, and skipped inspections as routine causes of injury and death. Yet the cycle continued, each new directive squeezing more from the steel and the men who stood beside it. The saw's appetite grew, fed by quotas and the relentless push for more. Profit came first. Safety last. The blade was kept spinning, no matter the cost in flesh or bone. The men prayed, the foremen demanded, and the owners counted their gains. The mill's ledgers recorded every board foot, every dollar saved, and every life spent in service of the machine. If these stories matter, if the cost of progress should not be forgotten, subscribe now to help us uncover more of the hidden history behind America's industrial giants. For every untold story from the mill floor, subscribe and join us as we hold the past to account. And if you believe the truth deserves to be heard, subscribe to honor those who stood in the shadow of the blade. The steel monsters have fallen silent, but the equation remains: profit over safety, machine over man. Today, workplace fatalities still claim over 5,000 American lives each year. The legacy of those giant blades is written in every modern fight for labor rights and safety regulations, a reminder that the cost of progress is always measured in flesh before steel. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more untold histories.